again, Bryce. And,
For me, it's a
you know
magic
how
number.
it is. I'm blaming the computer. You know, when
Yeah.
when when something goes wrong, you blame the computer, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's what people do to me anyway. All right, now Bryce Koon with us, writer and digital reporter for the LSU Tigers, 247 Sports, and as we mentioned, a great job with the Crowded Booth podcast. You guys have a lot of fun on that, and I watch it every episode, and you guys do a great job on the Crowded Booth. And of course, you talk beyond football. You talk about a lot of stuff, and that's cool. That's cool. But Bryce, it's good to have you with us. You're down in Louisiana. You cover the LSU Tigers as we cover the University of Georgia football here on our different platforms. But here we are. You know, this time last year, we were kind of excited in our neck of the woods as Georgia was going for the repeat. Uh, this time, you know, we're very dissatisfied in Georgia territory because we really think that the University of Georgia not only is one of the best four teams in the country, but you know, in Dog Nation, we think Georgia probably is the best team in the country. But you know, as things work out, you don't always get what you want. But it's good to have you on our program today. And how are things in Louisiana today?
Yeah, we were talking, I guess it was the first or the second time we tried to
Yeah,
do this thing, and the weather's a little bit touch and go right now, and I know it's made for, a lot of those travel, maybe early morning travel plans to Houston for the national title game, delayed, or maybe having to do a different route or something like that. So, no, it's been good, man, and enjoyed a very interesting season down here. I mean,
yeah,
look, you had the Heisman winning quarterback, which was just a blessing to be able to cover a guy like that. Jaden Daniels was a ton of fun to cover. But then a defense that was among one of the worst in the country. So it
yeah.
was just kind of a missed opportunity. And as I say that, the rain starts coming down outside my home office right here. So we hope that we stay with a stable connection. I'll let you know, Chris. I went with an upgrade recently in the internet connection, so that's what I'm banking on. It won't be the computer's fault; it'll be the internet company's fault.
There you go. It's never our fault. I mean, you
No,
know, our
no.
technology is, yeah, it's never. Now, Bryce, I do you have a background in psychology or any background in psychology?
Sometimes I like to think I do, but I don't.
Okay. Here's my, of course, you know, the game is tonight between Michigan and Washington, the championship game. Finally starting at a decent time at 7:30. You know, those
Yeah.
playoff games, I mean, ridiculous. I was up to 1:30 in the morning, you know, trying watching that last game, which was ridiculous, but the game will be on ESPN and Michigan and Washington tonight. So I need you to give me some psychological advice. Okay, I need you to explain to me why in the world did I pick Alabama to beat Michigan by 2 touchdowns? Can you explain that to me? Just why did I say, well, you know, Alabama's going to have no problem with Michigan. They're going to take care of Michigan. This is not going to be a game. Oops. Why did I do that?
Well, I'll walk you through there. I know you said you watched our show. And, last week we picked Michigan, or we picked Alabama to win that game. And
Yeah.
look, I mean, part of it is a lot of people like to refer to the SEC bias. Don't bet against Nick Saban. All
Right.
these different types of things. And look, I get that. I just think that Alabama was the hot hand. I mean, I'll sit here and say this. My background, and you know that a lot of my followers from my previous stop won't enjoy hearing this. I still think Georgia's probably the best team in the country. Like when it
Yeah.
just comes down to it, Georgia had a bad 2 quarters, and people can make a case for the full game, all these different things. They had a bad 2 quarters, and it came back to bite them. Next year, that won't be able to be the case. Georgia should, we won't have to worry about that with Georgia. But Alabama had flaws. Georgia wasn't able to capitalize on the mistakes, and Michigan was. And look, I think we got to give a lot of credit to Michigan. I mean, it's a well-oiled machine. Just they're just so deep. I mean, that roster. Chris, it reminds me a lot of when Georgia was trying to build the roster close to what Alabama had. Well, Michigan still remembers, the thrashing they took down in the Orange Bowl a couple seasons ago in that playoff game against Georgia. And ever since then, it's how do we build our roster out that can compete with that? And, they didn't have to face the best team in the country, arguably, this year. Now, tonight's going to be a different story, a different type of attack. But, I think it's more of the Alabama, people just saying, hey, you can't bet against Nick Saban. But Alabama had some flaws in snapping. I don't think Jalen Milroe is not the most polished passer by any
Yeah,
means. I call him Chris. They do this term a lot for pitchers in baseball. He's a thrower. He's not a pitcher. So I
right.
think Milroe to me is a thrower. He's not a passer. He's a guy that has to kind of take that next step to be a really great quarterback, and he's already a outstanding athlete. So, hey, I was in the same boat. So don't feel like you were the Lone Ranger over there. Feeling like Alabama was going to be destined to win this title.
Yeah, and, of course, Georgia lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game. And as I was watching that game, I had this kind of idea. Why does Georgia, when they play Alabama, why do we get the NFL Bama? And then a lot of times when Alabama plays somebody else, that other team gets the junior high Bama. I mean, it seems like when Georgia plays Alabama, raises it a notch, and Georgia I know Georgia's not intimidated by Alabama, not by any means, but you got to wonder sometimes, is there something between the ears with the Georgia players when they play Alabama? I think Georgia, is the better team than Alabama. They should have won that SEC championship. And in fact, from what I can see, a lot of odds makers are saying if Georgia was in the championship game tonight, they'd be favored over both of these teams. I don't know if there's anything to that, but Georgia's 1-5 against Bama in the last 6 games. What in the world? Is what do you think about that? Why can't Georgia up its game when it plays Bama instead of the other way around?
Well, look, I mean, it became a talking point, Chris, because they lost. That was kind of the biggest thing that I saw was, yeah, I mean, look, if Georgia were to lose that game going in, and they did lose it, but if that was going to become the narrative of the national championship game up in Indianapolis a couple seasons ago was going to be the outlier. And that's just kind of what happens. Like when you have a performance like you did, then you're able to kind of exercise the demons of the mental hurdle of climbing over what Alabama's been able to do to you. But I mean, like you said, I think Georgia's the best team on paper, and that these games aren't played on paper, and that's unfortunately kind of the brutal reality of what happened in Atlanta. Now, you talk about in that stadium. I talked with a lot of family over Christmas. That was some that were there in the stadium. I mean, it's just not been a place where Georgia wants to play Alabama, and there's a reason that Alabama fans call that place Tuscaloosa North or
Yeah.
Tuscaloosa East or Northeast or whatever you directional where your compass points when you're looking towards Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But I just think that there might be a mental hurdle. But then we saw in the Orange Bowl, like they were so locked in that game. And like I get the conversation about Florida State and whatever. We talked about it on our show. You still got to come out and play football. And you just obliterated a team that was not 60 points worse than you,
Yeah.
regardless of who was playing in that game or not. So you talk about the mental hurdle. Like, I don't think that it's as massive as the media wants to make it out to be. I think that's a good talking point. It's a good storyline. Kirby Smart's going to use that for fodder and for stuff during winter workouts and spring football and going into next season. But there is something to say about Alabama. Just, sometimes teams just have your number. And I think
Yeah.
Alabama, outside of that one, is a team that's just kind of had Georgia's number. And unfortunately, it's come up in the biggest spots.
Yeah. Well, and the sour taste, I think, in Bulldog Nation is the fact, okay, that this year you're not in the 12-team playoff
Mhm.
system. You're still in the 14 playoff system. With the 12-team system, Georgia would have made, obviously, the playoffs. Do you think LSU would have made it with the 12 team?
I actually think Ole Miss would have made it over them. Ole
Yeah.
Miss held the head-to-head win. They won 10 games in the regular season. I think that would have been viewed as a plus with LSU being 9-3 in the regular season. Now, look, I can't sit here and tell you. I'm telling you my opinion. I think we've learned we have no clue what the committee's going to say or
Yeah.
what the committee's going to think. I mean, would they have kept the Heisman Trophy winner out of it? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it would have been an interesting conversation to see, but. LSU, man, they decided to beat up on the Wisconsin Badgers in what was actually a really good bowl game, just
Yeah, that
back
was a
and
good
forth
game.
game. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a fun one.
Nussmeier had a great game,
Mhm.
and LSU, like Georgia, pretty well set, in the quarterback position for next season. In fact, you had LSU, you had the Heisman Trophy winner this year. It could be next year. Georgia might have the Heisman Trophy winner with Carson Beck. he should have, I think, more in the conversation this year than he actually was. He had a
Yeah.
great season, and and he's one of the favorites, one of the early season favorites to win the Heisman Trophy next year. Also, not only did I pick Alabama to beat Michigan, I picked Texas to beat Washington. And after
Same.
I watched that game, I asked myself, why did I do that? Washington is a very good football team, and
Yeah.
Penix, he's a dude. His throwing motion is for me an amazing thing. He could put the zip on the ball, just flick that wrist. I was really impressed with Washington. I picked Texas. Again, they're going to be in the SEC next year, so maybe I had the bias thing again. That was a very interesting game. Who did you guys go with in that game?
So I believe we have a 3-man crew that we do the college football shows with, and 2 of us went with Texas, and I think the other one went with Washington. Actually, and looking back on that, Texas secondary is probably the worst unit on that defense, and those receivers and Michael Penix, I mean, they just tore them apart. So I think it makes for a really intriguing matchup. A defense for Michigan that ranks #1 scoring, #1 overall defense, 8th against the run, #2 in the pass defense, against one of the best aerial attacks that we've seen, in recent history with Penix and those. I call them the 2 Jalen's. They got over there, and then obviously a Dunzy there too. So, going to be a lot of fun to watch this one. I think it's a potential strength on strength. And, Chris, I guess the good thing is, and Georgia fans, I know you always want to be in the conversation. You want to be in LSU fans too. You can kind of watch tonight. You can enjoy whatever food you're going to be enjoying, nachos, burgers, whatever you're throwing on the grill tonight. And the blood pressure only has to go up due to the food, not to the game. There you go. You're only putting yourself at risk with the food you're eating tonight, not the game, because you just kind of get back. I will say this, I'm an SEC guy. You're an SEC guy. I think it's good for the sport to have this matchup of 2 teams that have been really good all season, and 2 undefeated teams too, which I think is always a really fun one.
Yeah, it's got kind of interesting too. This is the swan song for the Pac-12, with Washington being in the championship game, and then you have Texas coming into the SEC. So that's kind of
Mhm.
an interesting, in that particular matchup. So in tonight's game, man, I've been all over the map on this thing. Some days I say, well, I think Michigan's going to win, and then other days I think, Washington's going to win. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a tight game. Um, I think if Washington gets on a roll, Michigan's going to have a hard time. I think
Yeah.
Washington's defense may have a better opportunity of controlling Michigan's offense than the other way around. I'm kind of leaning right now toward Washington winning this game. I don't know. 28-24. Does that sound reasonable? That sound all right?
Yeah, I mean, so we were taking a look at this game. The big question mark for me is on Washington's offense is if the running back Dylan Johnson's not able to go. I mean,
Right.
he said that he's going to be able to go. You have to question, how healthy is he after going down in like one of the final plays of Washington's drive in that win over Texas in the Sugar Bowl. So, if he's not ready to go, look, we've all kind of discounted Michael Penix a little bit at some point this season. Like, oh, he'll lose to Oregon the first time. He'll lose to Oregon in the Pac-12 title game. They're not going to beat Texas, and they just keep winning. And look, there's something to say about that. Georgia fans very familiar with the guy that's been counted out, like in Stetson Bennett, of just keeps proving you wrong. And look, Penix is immensely talented. My biggest question mark, Chris, is that can he make enough plays without the running game? Because that's one of the stats the broadcasters talk about and all the talking heads have mentioned is, early in the season, Washington ran the ball at about or passed at about a 60-40 kind of clip there. As they got into the stretch for the playoffs, including that final game of the regular season against Washington State, and then in the Pac-12 title game, and then against Texas, it became more of like a 55, 45. You started to kind of see them be a little bit more balanced. Can they have success if Penix has to throw the ball, 50 times? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I will tell you this. Michigan's defensive backs have got to be up to the challenge. You cannot let these guys run wild on you. And then the biggest key, like you mentioned, if Washington wants to win this football game, I would take the ball first and I'd try to go down the field and score. Like
Yeah.
I'd be aggressive because if you let Michigan play their game and get into their, I mentioned on the show last night, it's kind of like a boa constrictor. They're going to choke the life out of you. It's
Yeah,
kind of like some of those Georgia teams in 2021, 2022, with that elite defense that really could just score about 24 points, like you mentioned earlier, and then just kind of sit on it, and you really
yeah,
couldn't do anything. So, 28-24 Washington, I don't think it's completely out of the question. I had Michigan winning this game. I don't think they're going to make the mistakes necessarily that they made against Alabama. I do think they can choke the life out of Washington. Look, I'd love to see Washington and be proved wrong again. That'd be a ton of fun.
yeah.
I just have a feeling that this is kind of Michigan's year. This is Jim Harbaugh's year, and maybe his last year at Michigan if he wins it.
Yeah, do you think he's gone? With the situation in Michigan, him being suspended by the Big Ten, and then for the recruiting violations, and of course there's that the speculation on social media. Even if Michigan
Hmm.
wins, NCAA is going to take some of these wins away. Do they take the championship away? That kind of thing. I don't anticipate anything like that happening. But what do you think about Harbaugh? Do you think he's gone after I'm kind of on the fence with Harbaugh too. I think he's a good guy. I think he
Yeah.
has a lot of good qualities about himself, but there's just something about Jim Harbaugh that irritates you for some reason. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but yeah, you think he hangs around in Michigan, or does he head on to the NFL? Maybe to the Atlanta Falcons. I
Oh,
doubt it.
Chris, I wasn't ready to talk about it. I
I'm
wasn't ready to
sorry.
talk about it.
I'm
Oh
sorry.
gosh,
I'm
I was so
sorry.
angry.
I know.
Last yesterday, but it's
I
okay.
know.
No, look, I mean, like Jim Harbaugh's a good coach. He understands how to build a team. We have one fan of our podcast that just constantly talks about like, yes, Nick Saban is is perceived as the goat of college football coaching. You can't deny what Jim Harbaugh's done in his coaching career,
Right.
getting to a Super Bowl, as an NFL head coach, understanding how to deal with NFL players, and then coming down to the college level. Yes, at a premier brand and premier program, but building a consistent, national title contender, and what he's done over the past couple of years with Michigan. So, and if he wins this, you got to be talking about Jim Harbaugh as one of the best coaches of the past decade that we've
Yeah.
seen, across not only just college football but the NFL. So I'll say this: if they win it, like it's just my gut feeling, he's going. He
Yeah.
he has absolutely. I mean, you could make the argument he's done everything they wanted him to do. I mean, he's beat Ohio State 3 straight years. I mean, he's like what else is there for him to accomplish at Michigan? And like you said, he strikes me as more of an NFL guy and how he
Yeah.
goes about things. You know, the question's been asked to me like, what about Kirby Smart? Would he go? No, Kirby doesn't
No.
strike me as an NFL guy. Like he loves the college game. I
Yeah.
don't know if Harbaugh loves where college football is going necessarily, with all this stuff going on. And he much rather, probably coach at the NFL level where, look, he's going to get a lot of money to go somewhere and, rebuild another team. And like you said, it might be our Atlanta Falcons, which they just desperately need something.
Yeah. By the way, when I grow up, I want to be an NFL coach and get fired. Arthur Smith is going to get $17,000 a day for the next 3 years, not to coach the Atlanta Falcons. It's
It's
just
just,
staggering. And of course, what Jimbo is getting from Texas A&M for not coaching Texas A&M. But that's another story, for another day. So, I tell you what, it's a little dizzy. By the way, Josh Brown, one of our guys, he's kind of put in the a question: what would it take for Mercer to make the college football playoffs next year? Um, it would take a lot.
it, it would take a lot, Josh. Josh, it would take a lot. Josh is a good friend of mine, so I know he's
I
been there.
know, Josh.
He's a character, man. But no,
Yeah,
yeah. Hey, Mercer did make the FCS playoffs for the first time ever this year and won a
yeah,
game. So shout out to the Bears over there in Macon, Georgia.
yeah. They a pretty good quality program. If for Georgia fans, and I maybe for LSU fans too. You're closer to that than I am. But all of this stuff, the opt outs, the
Mhm.
transfer portal, the comings and the goings, the NFL declarations, and all of that going on, and it seems like just compacted. And then you have the recruiting classes, declaration day for recruiting. All of that was kind of packed in there to like a 3 or 4 week period after the end of the season, and it was just boom, one thing after another. day after day, this one's going, this one's staying, this one says he's going to declare for the portal. This one's going to the NFL. I mean, for me, this confusion that we have right now going on in college football. It, for me, I can't put my finger on why it's not good, but it doesn't seem good. It
Yeah.
doesn't seem like a good thing, does it to you?
Yeah, I mean, look, especially, with our company, I mean, obviously covering recruiting, covering, the transfer portal, covering a bowl game. I mean, I was talking with, our Georgia writers over, the Dogs 24/7 and some people, good friends with over on the Georgia beat. And they're like, the past couple of years having to cover early signing day, the transfer portal opening, plus a playoff game, and then a national championship. It's, it's bad for the media. It has to be bad for the coaches and their families. And I think, that's one thing that Kirby Smart has really been a big proponent of is, staffs and their families and the burnout that we've seen across from, college coaches.
Yeah.
And I just think like when we look at this, like we've got to fix this. I'll tell you this, and I haven't. We're gonna do a whole show on our podcast about this, and I haven't fully fleshed out like what the schedule would look like. But just kind of going through it, like I would be a fan of getting rid of early signing day.
Yeah, me too.
Because
Me too.
let's put it in perspective of pro football, okay? The NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball is different because you have a massive minor league system. But let's just go NFL, NBA. They don't, right before the start of the playoffs, Chris, they don't say we're going to have our draft, which early signing day, and then we're just going to open up free agency. They don't do that. And why in college football are we sitting here doing that? Like, it makes no sense to me why we do that. So I would be in favor of really kind of highlighting back to that February, that, the national signing that we always used to get excited about, really going back to that, making it. And then two, moving the portal back to you can't enter or move until the national championship game's gone.
Okay.
And so, look, I get coaches are going to move, and I understand that, whatever, but there is way too much roster confusion. And I'll tell you this: we were talking with, for the LSU Wisconsin bowl game. Brian Kelly was actually pretty, candid about the fact Jane Daniels was the only one who didn't play. Everyone else, played in that game. They had maybe one or two guys that didn't play, but it was a full on, and even guys, Chris, that like a guy like Malik Neighbors, who knew he was going to the draft. He wanted to break a record. He said, "Hey, I want to play." That was a rare, sequence. On the other side, Wisconsin didn't have that. They don't know who their starting running back is going to be. They're rotating in guys at linebacker that hadn't played all year. Georgia fans got to watch a lot of that for, Florida State. And I'll tell you this, like, I think, and I'll say this, there's not too many rational fans, because fan means fanatic, and I understand that.
Right.
But even the most diehard Georgia fan, like, no one enjoyed watching the Orange Bowl this year. Like, that wasn't fun. Like, I'll tell you this, the Florida State Georgia game at full tilt would have been better than the two playoff games. That's just my opinion.
Right.
I saw Florida State play in person this year, week 1 against LSU. Yeah. I thought they were a championship contender all season long, especially with Jordan Travis at the quarterback position. But no one wants to see that. And so the compounding of the transfer portal, early signing day, these coaches are having to spend 1 week recruiting, then going into the portal, and then bowl prep. It's not sustainable. And so, where we're going in this game isn't sustainable. And I'll tell you this, and this could open up a whole new conversation. I think the only two people who are going to be able to change it or really lead a charge is the commissioner of the SEC and the commissioner of the Big Ten, because those are your two big money-making conferences. And until they decide that the dollar sign, they've had enough of the dollar sign, or the dollar sign can't drive everything, I don't know what the end point's going to be. I think it's going to be, your middle pack teams, your middle class teams, just getting pushed out and pushed down into kind of irrelevancy.
Yeah, and I of course, obviously, I enjoyed Georgia winning over Florida State, but I'm like you. When Georgia was really just rolling, and you could tell Florida State did not have the talent on the team at that time to compete with Georgia. It wasn't a lot of fun, to be honest with you. You felt for Florida State. I felt for Mike Norvell on the sideline. Well, a great year, and then he has to end the season like that. I kept thinking to myself, this is not good. It's good that Georgia's winning. I'm glad they're winning.
Yeah.
But this just can't be good for the sport. And I think that the point that Kirby Smart made in the post game, press conference, that the NCAA really needs to look at this, and
Yes.
something needs to be done. And I thought, why not? Why can't we be nimble, and say, okay, you got Georgia and Florida State in the Orange Bowl. Let's make that a playoff game. Let's just on the fly expand the playoffs, to 6 teams. And
Yeah.
we can work that out. We can work that out. The lower divisions of college football work that out. We could work that out. And then you would have had all the guys on deck. And that would have been a lot of fun, but we can't be nimble. Have you ever seen the NCAA be nimble? I don't
I don't
think
think we've
so.
seen them do a lot of good things recently,
Yeah,
Chris.
not recently. Now, Georgia have the number one recruiting class, in most of the guys that make those rankings and that kind of thing. But LSU didn't do bad. Number 8 on with
Number 8.
247 sports,
Yeah.
and Georgia's really excited about the recruiting class. They missed out on Rayoli, but I think that was just it kind of hurt a little bit because the dude moved to Georgia, for heaven's sakes, with his family, and was at every Georgia game in Georgia gear. And then, of course, I know the pull to Nebraska. His dad played there, and he had an uncle has an uncle who's coaching there. That kind of stung a little bit, but still, Georgia. Georgia's very pleased with this recruiting class and very pleased with the portal.
Yeah.
The guys that have coming in from the portal. Georgia's very pleased. How about down at LSU country? How are you guys looking at your recruiting class and those guys who are coming into the program through the portal?
Yeah, I mean, look, Brian Kelly placed an emphasis on really keeping these in-state talent guys home. I mean, that's what he wanted to do. So 9 out of the top 10 players in the state stayed home. 13 out of the top 14. I mean, that's something that look, this. I mean, kids at Georgia, they want to go play for Georgia. Kids down here in Louisiana, I have learned there's no greater honor than to play for the purple and gold. Like that's what they grew up wanting to do, especially with the lack of other Power 5 teams here. I mean, it's LSU, and then it's a bunch of Group of 5 schools. So this is kind of the premier school to play at in the state. Look, they brought in a ton of kids that I think have some really good upside. As you know, Chris, we talked about this. They've got to fix the back end of the defense. They just have to. It was really abysmal at times this year. So they did that. Then you look at the transfer portal. A lot of the names they brought in, once again, guys, they're bringing back close to home. Louisiana, natives that they're bringing from Ohio State, Texas A&M, and Auburn to try to shore up the back end. And obviously, we've had the craziest week. I forgot. I was telling someone the day, the last week in LSU football was like the craziest one. You win a bowl game. You fire your entire defensive coaching staff.
Yeah.
Mind you, your offensive coordinator took the Notre Dame OC job, a couple days before that or right after Christmas. I mean, we've just kind of sat in this, and then you get the number 1 running back in the country, and then on Saturday, the number 1 quarterback in the country in 2025, Bryce Underwood, commits to LSU.
Yeah.
So it has been a whirlwind. I'll tell you one thing. I don't condone taking anything, but I will say I did take some melatonin last night to go to sleep, and it served me well. So look, man, it's there's excitement down here. There's excitement from the young kids, and talking with some of those guys out of the All-American Bowl about to compete in a new SEC, and to compete against the likes of Texas and Oklahoma's with a new schedule. That I'm excited. I'll tell you this, as a media member, I'm excited to watch. You and I've talked about this, Chris. I'm not a massive fan of the 12-team playoff. You teased, if we're going to have a playoff, you teased a 6-team. That's where I sit. A 6-team playoff is a sweet spot for me. But if we're going to do this, I will be honest with you, I'm going to be watching because I love college football, and we all are. And that's all they care about is those views on television and those views on those ticket prices for each institution. So it's going to be what it is. But LSU is primed, and you mentioned with the way Garrett Nussmeier played, to be in the conversation. And that's where Brian Kelly wants. You have to be competing for that 12-team playoff each and every single year.
Now, you mentioned the SEC is going to be a lot different next year. No divisions. And the schedules look like, for instance, Georgia opens with Clemson. Well, LSU opens with USC, for heaven's sakes, out in Las Vegas. And then Georgia plays Tennessee Tech and Kentucky. And Alabama, that's, there you go, with a big game there, obviously. Auburn, Mississippi State, those will be home games. Then Georgia travels to Texas. to Austin. Now that's going to be a lot of fun. Then they have the Florida game. Then Ole Miss at Ole Miss, Tennessee, Massachusetts, and then Georgia Tech. Now LSU, Southern California, the opening game on September the 1st. Then you have Nichols, and then you have South Carolina, UCLA. What in the world? LSU playing these Southern California teams. Then you got South Alabama, the Ole Miss Rebels, Arkansas, Texas A&M, Alabama, Florida, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma that LSU will be playing. It's just no more divisions.
Yeah.
Everybody's in there. Let's go get it and see who's the best. And I don't know how they're going to. There's got to be a tiebreaker for who's going to be in the championship game, and you're going to have a championship game because you're going to, that's a big money revenue kind of thing. But it's going to be fun and interesting next year in the SEC, as it will be in a lot of conferences. And I love these schedules. What a challenging schedule for both Georgia and LSU, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We're talking about LSU playing UCLA and USC, and
Yeah,
those are Big Ten teams next year,
yeah,
Chris. But no longer Pac-12
I
SEC
know.
matchups, Big Ten SEC matchups. But yeah, look, they loaded up their schedule. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to make for a lot of fun trips, to these games. And then you mentioned Georgia. I mean, look, when you go play at Alabama, I can go and tell you the Airbnbs and the hotels, they're already priced out over $1,000 a night. I mean, it's ridiculous over there. Austin, Texas, Texas fans are excited to greet Georgia warmly, I'm sure, inside their stadium. So, look, we may not like where it's going. I'm a traditionalist in the sense of I love the regionality of college football and it's really what makes it special, and it's what I grew up on. We're going to watch it, Chris. We are.
Yeah,
Like, we're going to watch Oklahoma
yeah.
play LSU the Saturday after Thanksgiving. We're going to love watching A&M play Texas again. That's going to be a lot of fun. Georgia going to Austin. I've seen so many, people back from my hometown be, purchasing their tickets and getting hotels over in Austin already. So, look, you can sit there and we can gripe about it and we can talk about it. It's where this sport is going, and it's going to make for a good TV product for the haves. For the have-nots, like, I'm sorry, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, Mississippi State, maybe not Mississippi State. They got a nice little new head coach. We'll see what happens over there. But Arkansas, I mean, Chris, we wouldn't have seen Vanderbilt play Arkansas in the SEC title anyways, and I don't think we're going to see them compete with no divisions either.
Yeah, it's going to be a different world, and I'm kind of interested just to see what Missouri's going to do. Missouri was a very good football team this year, and it'll be kind of interesting. I'm very impressed with what's happening at Missouri. And by the way, we did mention this kind of sorta. The Falcons dismissing Arthur Smith from his contract. And after 3 seasons of going 7-10 each season,
7-10 each
yeah,
season.
each season, and so just on that kind of level, for me, Arthur Blank and the general manager, they're good guys. I'd like to see a football guy hire a football coach for the
Yeah.
Atlanta Falcons. A football guy hire a football coach. I don't know. Is it a crapshoot to try to get a good coach in the NFL? I mean, you never know what you're going to get unless you get an established guy, I guess.
I was looking at something. So when the Falcons went and hired, Arthur Smith, that same cycle was when Nick Sirianni went to the Eagles. That's worked out great for them. They went to the Super Bowl and they're struggling. It's just all. It can't be that hard. Look, D'Amico Ryans was just hired out in Houston under a rookie quarterback, guys, and they went and they're in the playoffs in Houston. I mean, it's not that hard. And I will sit this. I'm in Saints country down here, so it's been tough already. But I'll die on this hill, Chris, with it. Like, this team is a quarterback away. The defense showed at times that they could play very well. One of the better defenses we've seen. You have all these weapons offensively. Look, yes, Desmond Ridder was a winner in college. Great, solid, really great college quarterback. That does not mean he's going to be, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And so Atlanta's going to hold that number 8 pick. Look, we were talking about a couple of the guys. I don't think Jaden Daniels falls that far, but a guy that might be there, or they might be able to trade it for him, is a guy like Michael Penix. That would be a lot of fun to see him slinging around all over Mercedes-Benz to Kyle Pitts, to Bijan Robinson, to Drake London, a host of other weapons. So I just think that you have to go get a head coach that is a football guy. Like
Yeah.
I think that's the frustrating. I'll say this and I'll end it with this because I could go on for about an hour about this. I feel like, but I'll end it with this. The frustration for me as a Falcons fan is not that they're just of this season. They've fallen so much from relevancy of the NFL. Like when we're talking about, some of the teams, like my wife and I were watching, the Bills and Dolphins last night. Those two teams, even though the Bills won, those are relevant teams. The Dolphins,
Right.
people know, kids know, who the Falcons are. They know who two is, Tyreek Hill, Josh Allen. You go to other teams, Patrick Mahomes. The Falcons are just kind of like, like you don't really. There's just the only reason they're in the conversation, Chris, and the only reason we're having this conversation is because they play in a terrible division. If they played in any other division, we'd be saying, "Oh, he should have been fired a year ago." It's I don't know, man. It's tough, and then obviously having to hear it from Saints fans all day so far today has not been fun either. But I guess the good news is the Saints aren't much better, but they have to keep their head coach. At least we get to move on now and try to find something different.
By the way, what in the world with the touchdown at the end of the game yesterday? Jameis Winston overrode the. Did I understand that right? The coach said don't score, take a knee, but the guys got together and said, "Well, we're going to score." I mean, I don't know. Is that a rebellion against the coach or just rubbing it into the Falcons? What the world?
So look, I mean, I sat in the corner of this. I had zero problem. I have zero problem with you playing aggressively, foot on the gas pedal. It's a rivalry. Like, there is going to be a little bit of respect lost between teams. That's fine. But the whole storyline of like Jameis Winston essentially signaling over saying, "Hey, we're going to victory formation," and then just running the ball.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just Jameis. Jameis is a character, and he's an interesting one, but it's definitely a weird situation. There for Saints fans, because I was talking with them. They said, yeah, we won, but it didn't feel like we won because now we have all these questions of like, does this entire roster not even like their head coach?
Yeah, kind of interesting. And the Saints did make the playoffs, right?
They don't.
I got in a dizzy and I couldn't figure out nothing. So, but
there's a weird algorithm. Tampa Bay made it. That's all we know.
Tampa Bay. Are you kidding? Baker Mayfield. Okay.
Yeah.
Well. It would sound like a one and done to me, but that's the way it is. All right, Bryce Koon's been with us. We've talked a lot of football. Enjoyed it, Bryce. Always great to have you on our program to be able to talk about Georgia stuff, college football stuff, pro football stuff, even baseball. Hey, the Braves are coming up. So, we got 30 days until
30 days, something until pitchers and catchers report.
Yeah,
so it'll be fun.
I'm ready for that. Go Bravos,
Let's do it.
There you go. All right, man. God bless you. Always good to talk to you. Go Dogs and go Tigers, right?
We'll do it. Sounds good, Chris. Appreciate it. Enjoy the game tonight.
Thank you, man.